Hey guys, Infidel 1258 here. Today I want to talk to you about the legendary airdrop summoner Lorkus. I'm excited about this one. It's not new. This has been announced for several days. It was first announced on the 16th, today's the 18th, but I haven't talked about it and I am excited about it. So I want to share my thoughts on this amazing new summoner. There's lots to talk about. The melee angle, the magic buff, I think I'm particularly excited about. The different tactics kits and how it's not just one but two. There's some really meaningful implications for what this will do to the meta of the game, and if this is one card of which there will be 6 summoners in this sort of range of power, that is very exciting for what it might mean for how the game feels different and continues to evolve and challenge its players by thoughtfully creating new ways to be the best. And so I'm excited for it, and I hope you'll stick around with me. I've got some thoughts on this card and we'll get into it here now. My name's Dwayne Cunningham though, and I go by Infidel 1258, and you can just call me 12. Leave comments on any video and I go through them regularly, and I do my best to turn them into content. So if you leave your IGN, I might just send a little thank you after I use your comment or question. So first off the bat, art style looks great, looks clean. I really do like these backgrounds. I've said it before, but the new backgrounds, to me, it's cohesive, it's distinct. It has a whole new modern and unique expression, like compared to other editions. It's just so clearly its own thing, and I actually really like that. Plus I just love I love it. I just love the simplicity of it. Plus it seems like they're making the backgrounds more simplistic, but then they're taking more time with the art of the card, in my opinion. And I would argue that this is, like, again, a whole new level up in terms of the art style. I love the color kit. I love the character design. He looks playful, silly, powerful. I think it's a great design. Well done, team. And beyond that, let's go into the elements. I'm not sure I love this element sort of combination, because we do already have a summoner Dolfar within that. Now this is obviously a far cry from what Lorkus is, and I'm going to say Lorkus is clearly the far and away superior summoner. 7 mana is pretty ridiculous for what this kit sort of amounts to, but let's go step by step. I don't know if I love this combination, but I really think this combination works well, or is powerful within the context of the magic in particular, because we've never had plus magic to these two, and we've long talked about how death edition or death element cards and even fire element cards have very powerful magic monsters, but that they never had that summoner that would bring them up that one next step, either by giving them, for instance, 1 extra magic damage, or maybe something else that really leans into magic. They've never had that. It's only been on Earth and on Dragon and on water. But now these 2 new elements get to see this +1 magic. The +1 melee is very traditional fire. It's new to death, but death always has melee manipulation. Usually there's been -1 manipulation or things like that. And so it feels like this is the more impactful +1 ability. In terms of what it can do. Now, a lot of what I just expressed is more from the wild perspective, because there are certain cards like the Elemental Phoenix, which is a 7-card legendary, I think, beta, and it does amazing blast damage, and now it will love the partnership of this +1 magic. From the wild perspective, there's lots of meaningful magic monsters from that splinter. Go fire, death, neutral. We go we go monsters, we go magic, and we go max. I like looking at it from the max perspective. There's lots of cards that are in the modern currently that I like for it. Life Sapphire, that has natural life leech, gets that 1 more magic damage. That's going to allow the life leech to become that much more meaningful. Things like Jin Apprentice with 4 damage output, becoming 5 for 5 mana is ridiculous. Plus the death blow. Another life leech with the Venari Bonesmith. But from the wild perspective, Flame Imp with 3 damage output for 3 mana. Crazy. Enchanted Pixie, 3 mana, 3 damage output. Dwarven Wizard, very strong snipe monster with this, especially in reverse speed rule set, plus the stun. 3 damage. That's just crazy. 3 damage for 3 melee, or 3 damage for 3 mana. Again, another life leecher that'll benefit. Another life leecher that'll benefit. But then you see cards like Elemental Phoenix, which is one I talked about with the Blast, and I love using it in my wild. Currently, I think it's on my land, but this card really does, is going to really enjoy that. And so my point definitely is that Fire and Death really have amazing magic monsters. Now they're going to have even more damage output, whether you're in the wild or in the modern. But for the most of the video, I want to focus on the wild perspective, or the modern perspective, but you have to know that this new summoner is going to be utilized regularly in the wild as well. And the interesting thing about the next thing I want to make, the next point I want to raise about this is, the kit here really seems to lean into some of the strength that the death and the fire element already have. And I would agree with the melee as well. But then I actually really like there's a synergy across the stat buffs with the tactic choices. So look at this. If you imagine you're giving yourself a natural damage output benefit with Lorkus, and then you bring Life Leech, and you can equip, 2 of your monsters with Life Leech, that's going to produce more Life Leech. Like I alluded to with some of those monsters that already naturally have Life Leech. And so I think that the plus damage output with the Life Leech makes a lot of sense. Affliction is always good. It's not exactly synergistic, but I would say it's at least complementary to Vampire, or to Life Leech. Life Leech and Affliction are great 1-2 punch, and a lot of monsters have that. So I like that a lot. But then alternatively, you get into the game, let's say, and you decide that you're not going to be able to, maybe they have void armor, and so your magic damage is gonna hit armor and not life leech you at all, not going to give you any extra hit points. Then you make this quick switcheroo and you go into trample and fury. And I would say that, like this tactics choice, option 2 has a premier ability and a secondary ability. The premier ability is the life leech, the secondary is the affliction, the premier ability is the trample, the secondary is the fury. There are going to be situations where the fury ends up being critical and pivotal, and it's probably the same with affliction. But generally speaking, I'm going to say that you're going to find the damage output with the vampire or the life leech is going to be your 1-2 punch, or the damage output, the melee increase, and the trample. And that's like the 2 lanes that you're going to be going down with this card. And I like how you could do both. I really like how you could do, for instance, you could do a primary tank, secondary tank, and make melee focused, and then in the 3rd, 4th, 5th spot you put in magic damage. So then you're getting the best of both worlds and opening up 2 different avenues for yourself to play with, right? You've got your melee buff in the 1-2 position, and you put, if you want, and if your opponent seems particularly vulnerable to the melee, you throw the trample on maybe your first 2 monsters, your number 1 slot and your number 2, and now you've got a primary attacker and a reach monster, both of which have trample. That works really well. When you get 2 tramples working together, that is very effective. And that'd be one play. And then in your back line, you might have magic monsters that you could conceivably decide, no, the melee play is not going to work. I need to focus on the magic, and then I'm going to use Life Leech on some key monsters to let them sort of turn the tides by increasing their hit points. Also interesting with Life Leech, it's not impaired by affliction. So if you afflict me, I can still steal life, just like with Scavenge. And so there are ways, like there are Mimosa Nightshade, where my opponent might prevent me from healing. Well, if I slap a Life Leech on a character, I might, that's going to circumvent the affliction in a sense. And then one more thought here with the trample. I talked about how you could do like a 1-2 punch and leave yourself 2 options to deploy your tactics. Either you put melee in the 1st and 2nd spot and magic in the 3rd through 6th spot, and that would be a logical play. But you could conceivably put, magic in the first 2 spots, And there are certain tanks, especially on the Death Splinter, that kind of makes sense on. And then you put some opportunity melee monsters in the back line, third, fourth, fifth. And then when you look at the battlefield, maybe you want your primary tanks, your magic primary tanks to have Fury. Maybe that ends up being really critical because there's a taunt on the opponent's side. Or you want your magic monsters to have life leech because they're your tanks and you want them to be able to steal more life. That would be logical. You could think those angles through, but simultaneously, the point is that the melee is not just from a 1-2 first position, second position. The opportunities, the sneak monster is going to benefit. And when you have opportunity monsters on your team, they can benefit from trample. And so there just feels like a lot of ways to play this, which is really versatile and therefore powerful. I expect that the other tactics, legendary summoners that are going to be airdropped through Rebellion will be probably equally powerful, if not more powerful. But I do think this is uniquely powerful. Now, those are my thoughts on it, and I definitely am going to want it. I don't exactly know if I have a price point for it in my mind yet, but I'm going to think about that, and maybe we'll have some numbers, some guess before the video ends. But I actually want to make a few more observations that are maybe more specific to the team itself. So if we look at this card and its elements, I think we have to immediately go, this should have an impact on Darflak. And I think maybe it already has. In the last 7 days, the price has gone down by 3%. We're around 30. Oh no, it's gone down from the 7-day average is 22 cents, but it was 7 days ago selling for what, 32 cents. That's a big decline in the price point. Rebellion has generally speaking held its value, but this card is just never been one that we've really sought after or that's been particularly valuable price-wise. And I do think this competition is really shooting it in the foot. It is what it is. I'm not saying it's a mistake. I'm not saying, it's unfortunate. I'm just making an observation. This card's utility suffers because of the new Lorkus card. And Lorkus isn't even out yet, but we're seeing people say, okay, well, I don't really care about this card, right? I'm not likely to play this. Yeah, there are some scenarios where because it's common or because it's only 3 mana and this is legendary, etc., you might not be able to play Lorkus. Regardless, Dolphor lost utility because of this new card. That's one observation I want to make, and I think the price point suggests, or the declining price suggests that fact. Another observation, like I said earlier, there's a ton of magic monsters that will benefit directly from it, and I think I really like some of the ones that are, for instance, camouflaged. You can do a really powerful magic camouflage team. I also like some of the things where you see blast. For instance, immolation. Ooh, Dr. Blight's so powerful in so many contexts, and now to give him another way to get that +1 magic damage output, I like that a lot. Ooh, and can you imagine Dr. Blight with 3 damage output with Life Leech and Scavenge? With Scavenge alone, this card ends up having, 10 to 12 hit points by the time it ends up being in the front position. Sometimes Dr. Blight wins just because of the number of hit points, but now add another probably 6 to 8 hit points on the Dr. Blight easily because of that you've attributed it to Life Leech. Or some of the, is there Bloodlusters in here? There is, isn't there? I really like the camo play, like I say, because you got big damage bombs from these things and they're just buried in the back line. And you got Techno-Wizologist as well as Magi Necrosi. Cards like Jin Inferni, as well as Techno-Wizologist and Necrosi, Cabalist. I think maybe Jin Apprentice probably make this new summoner a significant go-to in a magic only rule set. I don't think it beats out Immortalis, but let's say green's not available, this is now the immediate next best choice if green's not available. And even when green is available, the capacity to pull out 2 splinters and not 1 is going to increase the number of significant magic monsters you can field versus me. If I'm playing Immortalis and you're playing Lorkus, I like my odds, but you have to remember it's not just, there's other rule sets that are going to modify that experience. Is it even monsters only, odd monsters only? That's going to really diminish the sort of monster play pool you can draw upon. And therefore a second splinter or a second element might give Lorkus the edge in that. I'm going to be watching for that, and I think we all probably will too. Ooh, Moxian Rebel benefiting from the magic buff. Again, another path to benefit the damage output and therefore the weapon training capacity of that card. So definitely lots of synergies, and that's just the magic. But then we've got melee too. From a melee perspective, there's just, oh man, there's so many paths. Blast damage always benefits from more damage output. Trample, always natural trample always is going to benefit from the extra damage output. Retaliate is, you know, going to love another damage output. Monsters that have multiple, can you imagine Mantaroth, or imagine Coral Lurker with Life Leech? Because one of the only ways this thing goes down is if you get a good amount of speed on this thing, and you maybe bring blind or whatever to support it. It doesn't have a huge amount of hit point base with, like, it lacks void or lacks shield, etc. To give it the Life Leech and give it, you know, maybe 2 or 3 hit points extra every round would be pretty interesting, and it would really ramp up the capacity to provide heal. Yeah, and Life Leech on something like Forgotten One too, where it gets off retaliate shots. Conceivably, Life Leech could be a big game changer for this team. Or Trample too. Yeah, especially, yeah, man, Trample. It's so wild. Trample is an amazing ability. In the past, I've seen it from the wild perspective. I've seen Trample with the fire team be very powerful. And you've got examples like Lord of Darkness, you got Magnor, Hydra, of course. Trample is a very powerful ability, and now you can just assign it to whoever you want. I think that's going to be really extremely powerful. I don't know if I have anything. I really do believe this card is must-have, and I expected, and I said that the new legendary the tactic summoners would be must-have, and I think this proves that. If this is the base case, to me, there'll be others that will be slightly better, and probably some that will be slightly worse. That just is the nature of how these things get designed, but they're going to be roughly this good. The multiple tactics, so fun to think through. So much versatility in play, variety of play style. And then the multiple buffs too. Amazing. If I had to throw a number at it, if I wanted to, first of all, let's say Rebellion cards have held their value better than other cards. And if I look at modern cards, and I look at summoners, and I look at legendaries, and I look at regular, you know, Chaos Legion, $7 to $10. Not a really relevant comparison because Lorkus is a totally different thing. Arcane is probably your closest comparison, and we're talking $17 per BCX with that. This is clearly better. Well, hang on. Yes. I don't think you can argue that Lorkus is better than Arcane. Now, I like Arcane a lot, with it being Dragon as well as Ambush is a very special ability, but Lorkus does a lot of things and has more versatility than Arcane does. So, you know, how many Arcanes are we going to get? We have about 4,200 Arcane. We're going to get at least 4,000 Lorkus, plus all those that show up in the different packs. It's probably 7,000 before it all said and done. I bet Lorkus ends up being, like, you know, at onset, $30 per BCX. And, you know, you could see some decline in price, maybe some wiggle in the down to $25 range, maybe up to 40, maybe up to 50. I don't know, but, you know, we're moving quite quickly through the summoners. So here's another consideration, and maybe this will be my final thought. The price point on these cards is going to be radically fluctuating over the next 3 weeks to 3 months. What do I mean? Let's say 6 weeks to 6 months, actually. What do I mean? Rebellion has really held his price point. These cards, unlike other cards, have really have held their price point or gone up. I've been noticing everything's down except for Rebellion. And so you might think Lorkus is going to launch and it's going to do great and everyone's going to want it and it's going to go, the price point will go up, up, up. I think yes and no. I think there'll be great stability, maybe even price appreciation initially. But I think also what we have to come to expect is that as we get further and further along in these last remaining airdrops, the utility for Rebellion cards depreciates or goes away. Not fully, but partially. Meaning, part of the usefulness of the Rebellion cards right now, and part of the reason why they've held their value or gone up, is not just because they're good, but also because they can simultaneously be used within these mage wagons to earn other airdrops. As we get closer and closer, I think that you lose some of that utility and probably the price falls. But there's one offsetting and complicating factor which we need to sort of also hold on to, which is that in the next 3 to 6 months, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw full-fledged bear market stuff, bull market stuff happening for the altcoins as well as Splinterlands. That might be a pipe dream, but that's actually on the radar for me. I'm considering it a distinct possibility, and if that were so, that would probably, at least possibly, offset the bearish concerns around the end of the mage wagons. And so you have one factor that's potentially negative where the prices can come down because mage wagons end up coming to an end or getting closer to the end. And then you see sell pressure on these amazing cards. But there's also potential for sell pressure because the Lorkus is going to be awesome, but then the next summoner will be announced and they might be even better somehow. Or even maybe not better, but equal, and we can't afford everything we want. We want all the things, we can't have them all. So if Lorkus is awesome, but then there's a new summoner that's also announced and being awesome, is that going to distract or pull away from the acquisitions and buy volume for something like Lorkus? So those are two considerations around why the prices of this card, Lorkus, may be fluctuant and not up. But that other wild card has to be, over the next 3 to 6 months, is there this intense altcoin moment? And if so, does Splinterlands benefit from that? And if so, then I would expect cards like this, as well as other Rebellion cards, to do just fine. So that's the tension I'm trying to imagine through, but I would think $30 is a very reasonable number. And if you can get this for $30, I would say I would want to buy it. Let's put it that way. I would think it's worth even more than that, to be honest. It's the first of its kind. It's unique in so many respects. It seems particularly powerful. But as we look at the next card, weeks from now, we'll look at that. And I think you'll start to, if we're salivating right now over this card, we will be distracted as we see the next one announced. And that does impact our desire to pursue an amazing card in this Lorkus, because we end up saying, well, I only have so much money to spend. Maybe I wait for that next one because it's the splinters you prefer. Maybe it's Earth Life or Water Life, and you just prefer that combination maybe. Or maybe the new abilities on that next card are even more exciting somehow. So those are the considerations around price that I wanted to raise, and that's what I think about Lorkus. I think it's an amazing card, and we definitely are going to want it. I'm going to want it. I'd love to see what you guys think in the comments below. Have an amazing day. God bless.